Thanks for joining us for our Lunch and Learn and coming and learning, and that we can have this opportunity. That lunch was brought to us by Homespire Mortgage. So we have Kendall, Stephanie, and Jackie. We're going to let them talk about their business a little bit, and then we'll turn it over to RC Air and Mold Solutions. We have Robert Hedrick and Cynthia Hedrick that are going to give us a great presentation and knowledge about mold and hopefully all the positive points and solutions that will help us in our business. Thank you.
Good morning, or afternoon, what time is it? Almost there. Kendall with Homespire Mortgage, branch manager here in Martinsburg. Brought a couple friends today. We've got Stephanie Hill. She's our pre-approval extraordinaire. Helps us with your clients, gathering all the documents and getting us to closing. And then Jackie Barrett, loan officer with us at Homespire. But just want to come out and say, thank you guys for everything you do. Obviously, you're the lifeblood of us being mortgage lenders, because 9 times out of 10, they're going to reach out to you first. So we just want to be in front of you a little bit today and say, hey, we're here. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We got a lot of information on the table from Homespire. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions, and don't be surprised if we reach out to you. We'd love to maybe have coffee with you, introduce ourselves a little bit, and just kind of learn more about your business. Not going to take a whole lot of time. We do like to do a little bit of giveaways. Did I get everybody's card? Everybody get a card in here real quick? We're going to give away some fancy. You can write them on one of my cards.
We make it right.
Yeah.
Make it right.
Anybody else?
All right.
Yeah, go ahead. Take your time. Never mind. All right, we're getting the last couple cards. Does anybody have any questions for us as lenders?
What's your vision for the next month?
Say that again.
What's your vision for the next week or month?
Vision as in the elephant in the room, interest rates going up. So not so much a vision, but right now, just like anything else in your business, you got to pivot a little bit. I think education is key when it comes to not only pre-approval, locking rates once we're under contract, and really educating the clients on the decision they're making with that rate. Because unfortunately, we are in a rising rate environment. So rates right now, next week, maybe in a month, I don't know that they're going to go down. But when you educate that client about maybe, the lowest rate comes with the highest cost, is that necessarily the best benefit for you long term? That's what we're doing. Because whether you're us, Integrity, Prime, whatever lender you use, everybody's rates are usually on an even playing field. I mean, we've got 27 different investors, and all of them are, if we were to look up a Rocket Mortgage rate today, we're usually lower than they are, whatever their advertised rate is. But it's really educating that client and letting them know, hey, here's what today's rate is. Here's the cost associated with that rate. Are you going to keep this mortgage for 30 years? 9 times out of 10, you're not. You're either going to sell the property or you're going to refinance it, whatever it is. So there's no sense raising your, closing costs 2 points, which on a $300,000 loan is going to be $6,000, where you're never going to reap the benefits of paying for that points up front. So is there, concern with rates? Yes. With us, we're calling our pre-approved clients every single week and doing mortgage refreshes with them. It sounds fancy, but every single Thursday, if Patty sends me a client and I've pre-approved them for you, I'm calling them on Thursday and we're doing that mortgage refresh to update the rate, to update the payment, to update anything that needs to be updated. It's a lot of work, don't get me wrong, because nobody wants to make 30 phone calls every single Thursday, but Patty doesn't want to go show a house on Sunday, can't get a hold of whoever, and that client wants to write an offer, we don't know that we can make it still work. So that's why we're doing that. So yeah, it is a little concerning, but education and staying ahead of it is how we're still being successful. So any other questions? Perfect. Let's get some gift cards away. Stephanie?
Nancy Williams.
Kathy King. You have to start
Do the work.
Yeah. It was on the back.
Oh, sorry.
Justin. You guys, Justin. Thank you guys. And if you have any questions, reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you.
Thanks so much.
Yes.
We also want to invite you to the coffee social that we're having. We've been renovating the Homespire Martinsburg location, which is located on King Street. So that
Winchester Avenue.
Winchester Avenue. Sorry, Winchester Avenue. They're putting the finishing touches on it right now. So we'd like to invite everyone to the coffee social, which is going to be Wednesday the 26th at 9 a.m. So we'll try and reach out to you. We have a Facebook invite out there. If you can stop by and see the new location, we'd love to have you.
Brand new coffee bar. It's going to be exhilarating.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
All right, now we'll turn the floor over to Robert.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you guys for coming today. I've so many new faces. This will probably be our third presentation. My name is Robert Hendrick. This is Cindy Hendrick. Yes, we are together. I started RC Air Mold Solutions 10 years ago. We moved, actually started in Baltimore. We moved up here 7.5 years ago. Completely cold turkey, knew nobody, knew no business, and tried to kind of reinvent the business here. And thanks to you guys, and a huge part, it has been a tremendous success. So thank you very much. How many have I worked directly or indirectly with any of you? Anybody? Okay, so sort of. We're in picking mode right now. I know some of you guys hate to see us come, and some of you guys like to see us come. We try to look at mold as not an alarming thing, but a real thing, because so many people don't understand mold. And so many times it will scare, I've heard so many stories from you guys, how a buyer will just bolt if they hear that 4-letter word. They won't even give you a chance to have it evaluated to see how bad it is, what it's going to take to get it fixed. They're just like, nope, I don't want the house, bye. Especially in crawl spaces. And God bless them, I know home inspectors are a necessary evil, but they scare people, especially with crawl spaces. Mold is always going to be a part of a crawl space. It's just part of the natural environment. You have a dirt floor, you have outside air influence, it's below ground, you have lack of ventilation. So it's not uncommon at all to see some light visible mold growth in a crawl space. The key is it affecting the living space of where you live? So what we'll do, you can't really test in a crawl space, because to do a test, you have two factors that really will not make it accurate. One is the outside air influence, because there's always mold outside. Every day we walk outside, we're breathing mold spores. Secondly is mold lives in dirt. So when you try to test in a crawl space, it's always going to be elevated. Then someone will say, well, I want you to swab my crawl space. Okay, where? Because I can swab this joist, move 10 feet down, swab another joist, and get completely two different examples of mold. So that's really an inaccurate way as well. So basically a crawl space for us is a visual inspection to kind of see, is it rampant, is it just a spot here or there, and then make a determination based on that. But then more importantly, to take an air sample inside where you live and breathe. That usually will calm people's fears almost 100%. When you get a test back and you tell them, listen, the level above the crawl space is normal, it's less than outside. Yes, there's a little bit growing down there, but in the span of 40 years of the age of the house, not a big deal. And I don't think we've had one say, well, I still don't want the house. Usually that will calm those people's fears. Mold needs food and water to survive. I'm going to try to hit the three topics and then we'll go to some other stuff. One is, of course, a definite water intrusion, a pipe break, a flood, or something like your hot water heater explodes. That's a real water event. Secondly is humidity, and this is the one that gets people confused, because they'll go down in their basement, there's no HVAC climate control, there's no returns, there's no supply to condition the environment. So a lot of people then don't even put a dehumidifier down there. So what happens over time, the natural mold that's always in your house now has enough food and water with high humidity to begin to slowly colonize and grow. Well, you don't see it at first, but in the span of 3 or 4 years, you go down and look up and you see all this white fuzzy stuff on your joists. It's like, where did that come from? So the humidity, it can be just as big a factor, if not worse sometimes, than water, because it's a slower growing process and you don't see it as often. I like personally, I've done over 2,300 inspections. Cindy's done over 1,300 with me. We're both nationally certified mold inspectors. We do not do remediation. That is a conflict of interest to do both. So when someone's, oh, I'll give you a free mold inspection, guess what? It's coming behind it, inevitably. So when we go in, I lost my train of thought.
You said you don't do remediation.
Don't do remediation.
We're getting old.
Yeah. But I'm thinking more of the humidity. Oh, I know what it was. So you've got to keep it, sometimes since there is no HVAC conditioning system down there, you have to find creative ways to keep it dry and keep the air moving. And I know that sounds sometimes archaic, but one of the best ways is a good dehumidifier and sometimes just a stand-up oscillating fan to keep the air moving, especially in older homes, 70s, 80s, 90s. People want to finish their basements, but they have no conditioning down there. So inevitably, we just went in one in Winchester yesterday, everything is just white and mold, just covered, and it was like 60% humidity. I like to see 30 to 40 max for humidity in the basement. Industry standards for inside a home is 35 to 55. But at 55, I feel that's getting too damp in your home. So ideally for your living space, 40 to 45, basements 30 to 40 is ideal to keep mold at bay. Inspections, mold inspections. And I know a lot of times we're last on the list. I know it. It's like you've had a home inspection, you've had a water, you've had sewage, you've had termite. And your buyers are just like, I don't want to spend any more money. But I hate to say this, sometimes mold can be the most expensive repair if not found during a home inspection. And I'll give you a prime example. We just did a follow-up job yesterday for a lady. She had 4 home inspections. She spent probably close to $2,000 for home inspections, hired us for one of them, which it was miserably covered in mold, so she walked away from all of those. The last house, they were spent out, and the home inspector, he said, well, listen, I'll give you a walkthrough, kind of look at the bare bones, see what it's like. They didn't call us. They move in, they put everything, put new paint, new flooring, basement's finished basement, and about a month or 2 into it, she's like, I start smelling something. She called, because she knew us, so she called us back. We went over. Underneath the stairs, the whole basement had been leaking. They basically gutted her basement. And she was almost, she was almost in tears yesterday. Because that's the first she had seen the basement since they had done the remediation. But if she would have spent $300, she probably might have avoided that, or at least negotiated that price. So, like I said, I know you don't want to tax your buyers to death with inspections, but if you even remotely suspect or smell, like one lady, Patty, said she's got a good nose for it. If you walk in, especially a basement, and it's got this heavy, musty odor, there's something going on somewhere, or has been. Another is vacant houses. If a house has been vacant, and especially over in the woods, this is notorious. People, I don't need to turn the air on in the summer, my pipes aren't going to freeze. So they lock it down, it gets 90 degrees in there, 75% humidity, and next thing they know, they've got mold everywhere. And they think, well, why should I run the air conditioning? It's not going to freeze. But you've got to keep the area conditioned. You've got to keep that air circulating, the humidity down. So that's important. And when you do have a humid mold problem, again, it's a slow growing process. It's not like a flood. So that's why you have to kind of make sure you monitor that and whatnot. So inspections versus remediation. Most reputable remediation companies will not do their own testing, especially in this area. I work with pretty much everybody in this area. for the same reason that we don't do remediation. It's a conflict of interest. Do they know what mold is? Do they know what to do? Absolutely. But they don't want to come in and make you feel like, well, here's a $10,000 estimate, and you're like, well, you're just trying to get 10 grand out of it. But it's a lot of times, well, I see mold, why do I need to inspect it? Well, it's not always about what you see, and this is where a lot of people have a hard time understanding. When mold is growing, what you see is called a colony. That colony, as it's growing, is emitting spores into the air. Does that sound like those spores are what you breathe in. Yeah, it's nasty looking, you don't want mold growing in your home, but it's more important about what's in the air that you're breathing. So when we come and do an inspection, we do a thorough visual top to bottom. We'll look in places, and crawl in places, and get in closets and under stairs where most people won't go to look. Secondly, we can do infrared readings if there's suspected moisture. We can set up the infrared camera and scan the area for moisture intrusion.
And that does not cost extra.
Right, a lot of companies want to charge you an upcharge. I'm like, seriously, I plug it into my iPhone and turn it on. Wow, it's expensive. We do that, we do humidity readings, and then we can also do moisture readings in material, and we use pinless moisture meters. So we're not poking holes in your drywall as we're testing. So that's another option. Then lastly is the air sample. That will tell us what mold spores are in your home, what species and the concentration level. It's not just a yes or no, you've got mold floating around. Every home has mold. It's a part of nature. When you open your door to go outside, or it's a nice day today, I'm going to open the windows, you're letting mold spores in. But most homes are not conducive for mold to grow. So the spores kind of come in, they filtered out, they blow out, and they just wither away. When you have a humid or damp environment, that's when those can potentially cause a problem, because now they again have enough food and water. So our air sampling, we use state-of-the-art equipment. It's a bio pump that's pre-calibrated, and we use an aerosol cassette with a glass slide in it. I should have brought some for examples. But in that, so the pump pulls the air through the cassette, and it traps what's floating around in the air. And it'll tell us every exact species and the concentration level of what you're breathing in the home and the area that we test. And the lab measures mold spores in a cubic meter of air. So in this box of air is going to be X number of mold spores. And then it's like this room could have 300 or 400 cubic meters of air. So when you start adding that up, then it becomes a major problem. There are no state or federal guidelines for mold spore levels. And one of the biggest reasons is mold affects different people different ways. We've been in houses where they're eating supper and there's black mold growing up the wall. Oh yeah, we got some mold here, and they're just eating supper and like it's no big deal. We go to other homes and it's barely over threshold and they're like, I can't get here, I'll meet you outside. So every person responds differently. So if you put a standard out there, it would be a logistical nightmare. I mean, it would just be crazy town. There are some industry standards. One we look for specifically is called Aspergillus penicillium. It's every day outdoors, you're breathing, every time you walk outdoors, you're breathing in somewhere in your home. Normal for most individuals are 0 to 800 spores per cubic meter of air. Now let me explain how small a spore is. You can fit 250,000 on the head of a pin. That's how tiny mold spores are. So when you say 800, well, that doesn't sound like a lot, which technically it isn't. But what happens if you have a problem, that number can go as high as 200,000-300,000 per cubic meter of air. So when you start doing that and you're breathing that in, you're going to have problems. We also look for the black mold. A lot of people think, well, if it's not black, it's not harmful. Not true. But black mold, called Stachybotrys, is one of the most toxic. It is not a natural mold that is outside. It only grows indoors. That's what makes its toxicity so much more potent. So you can have 100 Stachybotrys would be equivalent to, say, 5,000 Aspergillus. So you have to break, that's our job, is to break down those numbers for you to understand what you're breathing because of its toxicity. We did a school in Baltimore, and they didn't follow the protocol that we wrote, and when I retested, there was like 10 or 20 spores of Stachybotrys. Again, when you can fit 250,000, that doesn't sound like a lot. but it's toxic black mold. I failed. I would not pass the clearance because I'm not gonna be liable if some kid gets sick from breathing black mold that you didn't follow my protocol with. So it's, yes,
What about the people that swear all you have to do is use the bleach? and it's
we'll get to
all-
that. Not yet, almost, I'm almost ready. So back to our process. So we do all that. We do the air sampling, we do the visual, we do infrared, we do humidity, we do moisture readings. Then once we get all that stuff back, the test results back from the lab, then we compile a report for what we found, the condition of the mold environment, and then recommendations if needed. A lot of other companies, I've talked to several mold inspectors across the country, they charge extra for what they call the protocol, what we call the recommendations. Because once you get done with us, then you will call a remediation company and say, hey, I've had it inspected, I've had it tested, here's what we need to do, what's it gonna cost? Unfortunately, a lot of other companies charge you extra for that, we don't. We include that in our cost. Then once you do it, you got a problem, you call a remediation company, they fix it, then technically you should call us back. What we do is called a clearance test for two reasons. One, you want to make sure the people that you hired indeed did their job properly, you know. So we come back and we do basically the same inspection as we did the first time in the area that was remediated. Let's just say your basement was bad, but you know, Robert, while you're here, I want you to test my main and upper level. So if the main and upper level are good, you don't need to retest those because there was no problem initially. So we'll go back, we'll go into the remediated area, and when we do a clearance, we look for what's wrong, not what's right, because that's when it usually will fail. There's insulation left behind. There was areas that weren't HEPA-backed. There was a bag of rags that they left sitting in a corner that they cleaned the mold with. It's usually little things that cause a clearance test to fail. It's never normally like they missed a big patch of mold.
No.
And then we retest, and if it comes back clear, we tell you, then you call the remediation company, so we got it clear, then you pay them the balance, and everybody goes home happy, and then you have to rebuild everything though. But you want to make sure whoever you hire, and anybody that asks for recommendations, they do this. If it would fail, they will come back and re-clean it on their dime, and pay us to retest. So you're usually only liable for one clearance test. Or they'll take it off your bill. Say, you know, if you pay RC $300, then we'll deduct $300 at the bottom. So that's normally the process of the understanding the life cycle inspections and then remediation. So if you want to hand those out, please, questions. I love questions. So and we'll get to some of this here in a minute. Especially yours is the first one on the list.
I actually had two.
Okay, hold that thought.
So with the black mold.
Yes, ma'am.
That's when it's black, you can see it, that's the only kind?
No, we'll get to that. There are about 1,000 different species in the U.S. alone that have been identified. About 1,000 different. I've seen yellow, I've seen purple, gray, white, black, orange. It has different. Aspergillus versicolor is a yellow mold. It's extremely dangerous. It's just as dangerous as Stachybotrys. So you've got to look for that as well. But you're right, it's just because it's not black doesn't mean it's not harmful. That's a good
But if
question.
it is black, then it's definitely.
Well, then there's a big problem somewhere. Yeah. Now, there are some molds that are black in color that are not black mold, but they still can be harmful. And again, you don't want anything visible growing. So, first one is here. Should you use bleach to clean mold? How many think yes? Oh, nobody's brave enough to say it. Oh, come on! No, bleach does not clean mold for porous material. Yes, ma'am.
So that's what I was reading, so like on a bathtub or something, you could ignore all of the bleach, not with plastic.
The plastic, metal, glass, yes, perfectly fine to
Not
use bleach.
drywall.
Not drywall, not wood, not wallpaper, not carpet, nothing like
So
that.
you just have to replace the wood in the.
Well, I'll get to that. Hold on. Good question. Let's go back to bleach for a second. The chemical structure, bleach is 90% water, 90%. Mold needs food and water to survive. The chemical sodium hypochlorite does not penetrate and to kill the roots. So you might wipe it off the surface and then, oh, it's gone. But now you've saturated the roots with water that's still in the drywall, it comes right back. There's been so many times people have said to us, I clean it every 2 weeks with bleach and it keeps coming back. I'm like, yeah, that's why. So no, no, no. Now, EPA says if it's less than 10 square feet and you feel comfortable, you can attempt to clean mold yourself. I don't recommend it because there's a lot of different things that can happen. When you start to go in white mold, it aerosolizes and it goes into the air. So when you're down there doing this, you're just sucking in mold spores by the thousands. So I don't really recommend it. If you have a little patch like this or see something, there's a product at Lowe's or Home Depot called Mold Control. It's an antimicrobial. You can use that to kind of clean that off. But what you would do, in reference to your question about replacing the wood, depends on the severity and then how far it's eaten into the wood. Sometimes the mold will just grow on the surface. Yes, it has some tiny roots, but it hasn't like embedded itself. The wood's not wet, it's not rotting type of thing. In that case, you can usually clean the wood, whether it's yourself or via a professional. You don't have to always replace the studs. So you can HEPA-vac it and wipe it down with an antimicrobial, and then lastly they fall, and that usually will take care of it. We got into the EPA does not regulate spores. Again, how many species? Any questions about bleach before I go on? So we're good now? So if you, again, PVC pipes, if there's black mold or dust and debris, mold does not grow on those items. It is not a food source. Plastic, metal, glass does not grow on. Cinder blocks, it doesn't grow on. But it will grow on the microscopic dust that settles in those porous holes. So it will grow on that. But concrete is not a porous, not a organic material that mold can feed on. But yes, it will grow on the dust and debris that's there. Like I said, mold spores are you've got 250,000, so they're tiny. Normal industry standards for Aspergillus penicillium is 0 to 800 roughly per cubic meter of air. If it's 950, even 990, we're not going to split hairs too much on that. Again, that's why I say we don't look at ourselves as alarmists, but realists. We also do an outdoor control sample every time we do a test because you have to have something to compare to. Because when you walk outside, especially this time of year, the mold spores are spiking because of the leaves that are falling and dying. So when people say, I have fall allergies, well, it's not pollen, it's mold. And even in the springtime, mold spikes when everything starts to bloom again. So a lot of times it's not necessarily pollen, it's also mold, it's mold spores. So we always take an indoor to outdoor. When Aspergillus gets to around 1,200, 1,500, you need some what we call light remediation. Come in, HEPA-vac, wipe down the walls, run some air scrubbers, and maybe even fog. And that usually will take care of it. When you get into 3 to 5, 7, 10,000, now you're getting to more in-depth remediation. You have to throw away all porous material. Sofas, carpets, paddings, curtains can be washed, but depending on the levels, it's cheaper to, Yeah, it's all gone. It is so sad to see when I have to tell people, the basement is just like full of everything and you've got to throw it away. I mean, you just can't clean it to get it sufficient to pass a clearance test. So porous, and then anything that's hard items, wood, furniture, records, CD cases, containers, those have to be removed and then cleaned and processed outside that area before they can be brought back in. So it's an in-depth process, and unfortunately, mold remediation is labor intensive. You can get 2 or 3 guys come in and demo a basement in half a day, but it's the intricacy of HEPA-vacuum every square inch of a basement by hand, and then going back and wiping it down with an antimicrobial by hand. So it's very labor intensive. Question? Oh, okay. You're looking like, huh? So questions up to this point, please, jump in. Nothing? Good.
Is it only if the mold is like at certain levels, or does that have to happen?
Yes,
or-
yes, and again, when it's, well, like I said, if it's like 1,200, 1,300 aspergillus, normal 0 to 800, yeah, you want to get it cleaned up, but again, you don't have to do a lot of demo, it's mostly just a professional remediation cleaning. When it gets higher than that, that's when you have to determine what needs to go, what else needs to be done. Sometimes in basements that are finished, there's no ceiling, so you have cavities behind those walls. The spores get in behind those walls where you can't get in there to clean it, so you have to demo the walls to be able to clean behind the walls. So it can just really be a sad time for a lot of people. I never enjoyed giving people that news, but I always thought that's what you paid me for, is to tell you what's going on. So if you see mold, at the bottom of the page, you know, that's not good. There's something going on. You've either got water or you've got too high humidity. So you wanted to at least address it and see what's going on. Is all mold black? No. As I shared earlier, I've seen a variety of different colors growing in my career so far. Is black mold the most dangerous? Yes, and I think I touched on that because it only grows indoors, and the type it is, the toxicity levels are much higher than, say, aspergillus. Not to minimize any other mold spores, but it is more. If you find Stachybotrys or Cotoneum, which is, I call them sister molds, they kind of grow on top of each other. If you see those in a pre-test, there's something going on. We just did a house in Ellicott City last week. They had their washing machine had overflowed. No visible mold whatsoever. Looks dry. Everything was good. One spore of Stachybotrys was in the air. Now you're thinking, well, one spore, but so there's something growing somewhere because it doesn't come in from outside. So I'm going to have to call them today, unfortunately, and tell them they're going to have to tear out the wall behind the washing machine, because that's the only place I could figure it would be.
It's like all related to water leaks.
It's right, water.
Everything is water, water, water.
Is all mold dangerous? Yes. Depending on the person and the concentration levels, all mold has the potential to be harmful to an individual. Did a basement and another one in Baltimore. We still work in Baltimore. I don't know why. We drive down there. Crazy. But the realtor, God bless her, she was like, oh, I see that all the time. And this basement was covered in mold, in gray white mold. I'm like, well, this isn't good. You know, you can't have it growing. And, so yes, all molds can be. I've had many people say, well, it's not black, it's okay. Well, not really. If you have mold growing, period, it's not okay. It's just not supposed to be in your house. The average family puts 5 gallons of water into their home every day between showers and cooking. So that's why the HVAC system is so important. It pulls that dampness out of the air, pulls it across the coils, pulls that moisture out, reintroduces drier air, and keeps the environment conditioned. We go into some homes where the humidity is 70%, they got mold growing around their vents, and the temperature, they got it down to like 60 degrees, but it still feels like you're in a sauna or a steam room, I guess would be a better room. Well, their HVAC system is not working properly because it's not regulating and pulling that dampness out of the air. So they keep thinking, well, it's sticky in here, it's hot, so they keep dropping the temperature. But what they're doing is now putting more colder, damper air, and as that air comes across those vents and hits that drywall, water condensates microscopically, and mold begins to grow. So when you see that, there's usually an issue with the HVAC system that's not functioning for one reason or another. Cool, yes?
If we're in a house and we're showing, you know, say these or something, there's black mold, we can see, how much exposure is safe for us to be in there?
That's a good question. If you see black mold, you probably should leave.
Okay.
Yeah, you should probably say, you know, I'm not trying to scare you, but I don't feel comfortable being in here. I know some of you probably be like, well, you know, it's just a little mold. And again, if you see a spot like that, okay, you gotta use, your judgment and your comfort level. But if you go down and you see a basement and it's 3 feet off the floor, get your clients out of there.
Yeah, the
In all
listing agent
seriousness.
should ask you to sign a waiver anyway,
Yeah.
so you wouldn't have to walk in and be exposed to that.
That's a good point.
Well, you don't know until you open the door and walk in, that's the thing.
I mean, a listing
Yeah, but
agent
the
is in there.
Oh, the listing agent.
That's not a mold expert. No, but
Right, I know you guys can't use the word mold.
exactly.
You can't, most home inspectors, in all honesty, cannot use the word mold. Right, fungal growth, suspected fungal growth. So that's why, we can call it for what it is, call it mold. And again, that musty odor is the off gas that mold is producing when it's growing. So when you smell that earthy, musty smell, that's a gas that's floating around in the air. Now, again, some basements have that earthy smell to some degree sometimes. But if you open that door and you, like most of you guys, yeah, get good noses. If it's just, wow, there's something going on here. So then you have to decide, do I want to go in and show this house? Or do I wait and see how good or bad it is? The main way mold gets into your body is through breathing. One of the ways, and never do this, but one of the ways sometimes we have to inspect is to test it, is to actually wipe your finger across it. If it's active live mold, it will smear, and it also feels like wet baby powder. If you've ever had wet baby powder, it's kind of what it feels like. Because sometimes there are stains that was previous mold growth, but now it's inactive, but it's in a dormant state. Mold really never dies 100%, it just goes into a dormant phase. And if humidity or water is re-entered into that area, it will just boom, come right back to life.
Can you burn it? Like, what if somebody got in there and burned it?
The house? I said that one time and the guy didn't laugh, and I was like, okay, all I had to say. So what should I do? I said, well, 5 gallon of gas and match would be a good start.
I mean, what if
And he just looked at me and he's like, oh, all right, you mean
I think
that?
that's when I first came
Yeah.
on board, and I was in HR before, and I was like,
I mean, what if you got it and you took all that wood outside and then people burn it? I see them burning it outside in a big pile.
I mean, I posted on our Facebook page a couple years ago, there was actually a church in North Carolina, it was so bad they had to set it on fire
Yeah,
and let it burn.
that's not killing.
Yeah. But they had to burn a building down, it was so
Yeah.
bad.
Well, a lot of them have to be.
Well, I want to touch on that. Most of them, every time, and I've seen really bad cases, can be fixed. Now, can it be costly? Yes. Can it be arduous? Yes. Is it a pain in the rear end? Yes. But if somebody really likes the house, and you guys hire us, and we come in and give you, normally most of the time it can be rectified because we're there to make sure it is. Like I said, we come back. It's so important to do a post test because a lot of people waive them. I don't recommend that because how do you know for sure? Especially if it was really bad. So it's really important, and I'm not trying to get extra money to come back, but it's a peace of mind for everybody and for you guys. But most houses, in most conditions, can be rectified. Now, if you tear out the walls and there's a crack in the foundation, now you've got a bigger problem because you've got to get that repaired as well because you don't want to build back and have a continual issue going on. Like yesterday in the inspection, there was some plumbing that had the green corrosion around the copper pipes. And I told us, you need to get this fixed before you build it back because if that springs a leak, you'll be right back where you were. But it's not like the end of the world if there's mold. And I can't stress that enough. Especially in a crawl space. Again, just tell them, I've had a class on this. There's always a little bit of mold in a crawl space. Let's get the rest of the house inspected and tested and we'll make sure it's okay. Just kind of calm their nerves a little bit, make them, not panic and run away. Because I've seriously done that. Yes, ma'am.
So I know you can't answer this question exactly.
Sure.
Like, do you guys see, I know you have like probably really simple cases and the worst cases you can imagine.
Yes.
But is there an on average, like,
Cost?
for you guys, just like an on average, like usually it's this amount? Or, I mean, not like this amount, but just like, what would you say the average dollar amount is spent in your people that do?
To remediation, I'd say 5,000 to 10,000. Yeah, I'd say that's a good average. I seen one in Winchester was $56,000, but this guy was his second home that was 8,000 square feet, so it was like, okay, you know, whatever. But I also saw a homeowner in Hedgesville in Northridge, his basement was $38,000, they did get it down to 33. But who has $33,000? But in the same breath, you can't live with it, so you're in a really, it's a hard place to be, and I
The
feel.
cost of a dehumidifier can save a $500,000 house.
You can't, yes, and if you monitor it and maintain it, yes.
People don't.
They don't think about it, people are reactive, all of us are, not proactive, that's how we're wired. We usually don't respond until something happens, a lot of times. I mean, not everybody, but we find that, yes ma'am.
Question now, with people with their basements or crawl spaces, the pink insulation
Yes.
tends to grow it more when it gets wet. What about these builders I know, not so much in this state, but I know some of the other states, some of the builders will not use that anymore. They will only use the spray insulation. Is that better?
The blow-in or like the foam?
The foam spray?
We just saw that.
Because I'm talking like Wisconsin.
Yeah.
The builders there will only use that now.
Well, here's the thing, depending on the levels, you have settled spores on that funky sponge-looking insulation. So how are you going to get those spores off? That would be my question. Are you going to try to HEPA-vac the best you can on an uneven surface and or fog, which will hopefully get in and kill anything left behind? But it could be tricky during your remediation. We did a house down in Berryville just a couple weeks ago, and her house has that. And that's one of the first times I've seen a whole house. I don't think that's a good idea because a house is supposed to breathe. Houses are designed before the 70s, before this first gas crisis. Houses were made to breathe because a little bit of outside air to come in and out, to keep mold at bay to some point. But after the 70s, when the energy crisis, they built houses so tight, there's no air movement. So that's why HVAC systems, ridge vents, side vents in your attics are so important because it has to, it's called a stack effect. Air moves from bottom to top and out in a home. So it's important to have that movement to some degree, and that's why HVAC systems are so critical and sized properly to regulate your home and keep that humidity down. I just don't know how it's going to pan out. Now I know Wisconsin doesn't have this hot, damp summers like we do, so maybe it's okay.
Okay. So you don't recommend me to rip out my pink and do that?
You mean in your
Because
basement or
we're
your
redoing
attic?
our basement right now, and I just can't stand that pink stuff, you know?
I mean, would you think a basement would be okay? I'm thinking more of the attics.
Yeah.
Basement would probably be okay, but again, you want to make sure you keep it climate controlled.
Right.
Dehumes, if you got any vents or returns, make sure they're open. Now, it's another thing, in the summer, if you do have HVAC supply vents in your basement, you don't want to open them full blast, okay? Because the basement's already underground, you've already got a certain amount of dampness. Your air conditioning air is damp. So if you don't have a return to circulate that air, you're just flooding that basement with cold air all summer long, and it makes it damp. So I always recommend at least close them halfway in summer, and then winter open them all the way so you want that nice dry heat to get in there and keep it dry. So that's another thing. Yes, ma'am, Pat.
When you said about, like, the crawl spaces almost always have mold in them,
Just-
but if the house, inside the house is fine, is there a need to remediate the crawl space?
Not if it's okay, because here's the thing. Let's just say the house is 20 years old, okay? And we find a little bit of mold growth in that crawl. Well, it's taken 20 years to get to that point. And that's all it is. In another 20, it's only going to be double that. And if it's only a little bit, it's not that much. I would say no, I would not remediate it, because if it's not affecting the inside of the house, let sleeping dogs lie, so to speak. Well, go ahead.
I mean, this is a separate question, so if you're not.
Oh, well, and Cindy brought up a good point. If the HVAC unit is in the crawl, that's critical because you gotta make sure it's sealed properly, or it could be pulling spores through. So, and that's another thing. You gotta make sure most crawl space HVACs do not have filters. Some of the old ones do, but the newer ones, the filters are inside the home. So that unit is sealed tight. So as long as it's sealed and there's no gaps, you're not pulling anything from the crawl. But even if you did remediate, it's still dirt. It's still outside air. Unless it's rampant, and just hanging and damp and nasty, probably I don't usually recommend remediation.
And then with the crawl space with the vents, are you supposed to change those seats or open and close those?
Boy, there's a lot of debate about that. Yes and no, because you want some airflow, but in July, when it's 90% humidity, you're putting more damp air in there. In April, when it's raining, it gets damp. In the winter, you want to keep it closed because it's cold if you got pipes down there. So I've heard and read arguments on both. You kind of have to just kind of check it out.
Don't buy a home with a crawl space.
Well, that's kind of hard to do around here. I've been in more crawl spaces than I care to talk about. So go ahead, your question.
So does homeowners insurance help cover the cost
Good question.
of mold? Do you work with insurance companies?
We don't.
Okay.
The remediation companies do, but that is a great question. Yeah, most of them don't. Because it's just an insurance company. There are no insurance agents in here. So.
I can answer that. No, it's not.
Now, some will. USAA will. Erie does to some degree. It goes by state too.
Are you talking about remediation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And our fee too. If it's mold.
Well, it's actually mold, it's been an overtime problem, so it's not something sudden or accidental, it's an overtime problem.
Right.
So
If
State
you-
Farm speaking from that standpoint, they would do not.
Right. If you have a leak, but here's the problem. If you have a pipe leak that's a pinhole, you may not see it for 6 months. But because it's been 6 months, they will cover it. Now, if it's a flood that happened, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, and they have to cut out the drywall and stuff, that's usually covered.
That one is covered.
Yeah, that's usually covered. They'll do a 2-foot flood cut. And normally when there is a water event and there's drywall, you do a 2-foot, what they call 2-foot flood cut. The reason they do 2 feet, drywall is 4 feet, it's so easy to replace. You just slid it down the middle, put it on there, instead of trying to measure a 6 inch or whatnot. Plus you want to make sure that you've gotten all the dampness and potential mold on that piece of material. But that's a really good, I get that asked all the time.
So if someone's selling a property and you find mold, I mean, really, it's something that's happened over time and they're going to be responsible for the cost,
Okay.
right?
We mean if,
For the most part.
you mean as a homeowner?
Unless there's so if there's a flood or something happens, then you take care of it then, insurance would potentially cover it.
Now, some companies do have riders that, okay, we'll give you $5,000 towards mold, or 10 grand. USA is a good one, no offense, but they're good. They do cover most of the cases, it seems that I've run into. But no, we don't work with insurance companies because we only charge a small fee. But sometimes the remediation companies can help you to kind of navigate those waters to help maybe cover some of it. I've actually had them do that, heard of those stories. Questions? So far so good. Am I boring you to death yet?
Now we're just scared to death.
We all have homes tested now.
Mold can begin to grow in as little as 24 to 48 hours under the right conditions. It doesn't take long. So if you got a water event, you want to get it addressed. Not that I'm saying that you would have mold instantly, but you want to make sure you get that dried up as fast as possible and get whatever. If carpet gets wet, especially the padding you cannot save padding. It's got to go because of it being a foam. It just sucks the water and holds it. You can't dry it. So our dehumidifier overflowed the spring. Fall Maple, and so we had to cut the padding and dry the carpet, but we caught it like the next day, so it was good. Can you paint over mold? We get this question a lot. The answer is no.
Well, you can, but should you?
Well, yeah, I'll find it if it's there.
Doesn't kill it.
No, no, we will not kill it. It will eventually grow through. Not to reference another job, but we just did a job in Westminster for an apartment, and his HVAC was condensating, and there was mold against the wall. But there was also mold inside the wall cavity where we found it as well. But underneath, they had painted over it, but I could see the dark black hue of the mold there. And I said, they just painted over. There's mold there. And when they pulled the HVAC unit, the whole wall was top to bottom, about this wide, black mold, where it had been sitting there. I said, there you go. So he got a whole new HVAC unit out of it. Let's see.
Now, how would you protect the including that in the mold testing?
Yes.
Do you take precautions?
Not as much as we should, I'll be honest. Just being honest, being real here. If we suspect, like the basement we went into yesterday in Winchester, as soon as I opened the door and saw it, we immediately put our respirators on. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, there's been times where we've been in a really nasty home. We come back home, we strip in the garage and wash our clothes because you don't wanna bring that into your house.
How'd you think that vision?
So, sorry, but yeah, so, I mean, but normally we put our respirators on and wear that.
And even if we're going from one job to another, we'll roll all the windows down in the car
Yeah,
and just let that air just blow for like 20 minutes while we're driving to the next job to help blow it off our clothes.
and we wipe off our equipment.
Right, before. And that is one.
Because you don't wanna bring that into somebody else's home, you know, so if you have another job after that, so you wipe it off.
And there is a method to our madness in regards to testing. So you call us and you say, I know I've got a mold problem in my basement, but I want the rest of my house tested. Especially, you should always test at least the level above the area that's affected, because migration, again, 250,000 head of the pen, aspergillus just floats around like free willy. I mean, it's just everywhere. So if we know there's a problem, we won't go in the basement first. We'll test the main level first, so that when we do go down, we're down there for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, come back up and then retest the main level, then you make the potential of bringing something that's not really in the home on that level. So we're very methodical about how we do our inspections and testing. You know, we make sure because we want to give you the best readings. And like, let's just say that the basement doors here, well, I'm not going to put the test sample here. I'm going to put it over where you are. Because, yeah, it might be high right here, but that's not going to be indicative of the center of your home. I want to make sure it's not traveled further. Yeah, it could probably be high right here, which would not be surprising, but I want to make sure it's not over there. So we'll try to move the test sample in the unaffected area to a center location to get a very accurate reading. So there's a lot, little intricacies that goes into doing these inspections and testings. Symptoms. A lot of times, two things. People are like, I've had a chronic cough, I got runny nose. Or the big one is, I go away on vacation, I feel great. I come home, within 3 days, and I feel like crud. There's something going on in my house. And that's usually a trigger for a lot of people. Once they leave the environment for a period of time, they start to feel better. When they come back, they'll start to feel bad. So those are some triggers if if you don't see anything. A lot of times it's hidden, and that's part of our job, is to try to find out where it is, what's going on and whatnot. When you look for mold, if this is your flashlight and this is the wall, you never look for mold straight on. If it's white or gray in color, your flashlight will wash it out. You turn your light vertical and look down, because if it is growing, it will cast a shadow off the wall, and you can see it growing. Especially the real light gray or light white mold. Some of the most common is Alternera, Aspergillus, Phascorum, Penicillium, and Stachybotrys. Those are probably your 5 biggest molds that you should be concerned about. There's a mold called Basidiospores. That's the one that's peaking right now. We did one in Martinsburg the other day. It was 18,000 outside in that cubic meter of air. So, but inside the guy's house was like 1,800. Well, I'm not worried about that because I know just by opening the door 2 times to go in, we probably let those in from outside. So that's, again, part of our job is to analyze these results and break it down and see what really is and isn't going on and what's a concern. Yes, ma'am?
Okay, so back at the very beginning, it's been in my mind. You have big crawl space under a commercial building.
Okay.
And if there's mold under there, why can't you smell it up on the working levels? And how do you correct that? By a dehumidifier or?
Well, if there's mold, no, you have to remediate it first.
I mean, you can smell dampness and, I mean, it's in the floodplain, so it's had issues and.
Well, you've got to try to get it to, there's 3 conditions I follow. It's called IICRC guidelines, Institute for Inspection, Cleaning, Remediation Certification. That's a Bible that's been compiled for the last 50 years by mold professionals for testing and remediation. Huh?
Is that a mold baffle?
Yeah, mold baffle. I will not recommend any company for remediation that does not follow those guidelines. And there's a few scattered about in this area, not local, up in another state, that are not, that say they do mold remediation. And sorry, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. It will
On
not.
a dirt floor, it's not gonna work.
Well, I'm talking just in general. So let's get back to, I'll get through. So whoever I recommend is IICRC certified. It's condition 1, condition 2, and condition 3. 1 being the best, 3 being the worst. That's how they classify an environment. 1 is what they call normal fungal environment. 2 is settled spores, visible or hidden mold growth. 3 is spores with visible or hidden mold growth. So that's how they classify. In a commercial building with a dirt floor, you said, you should put a vapor barrier down.
We do.
You have a vapor barrier. Is it intact and
Probably not like it should be
Should be,
halfway
okay.
up the wall and steel, but it's in a flood zone and it's right next to where the springs run water going through town.
does it, and the water enter frequently?
When it gets high up, it can come in, yes. It's like,
You find a losing battle.
I know, it's like,
Yeah. Yeah, because even if you remediate and get it nice and clean and free of mold, the next water event, you just have to keep it dry. I mean, if you know you're gonna have a water event, or you sense it or it's coming, you get some industrial dehumidifiers and blowers down there to just
Blowers.
dry it out as fast as you can. Dehumidification is huge for getting rid of the dampness. Yes, ma'am?
If you have a water event, as you put it, or flooding, are you guaranteed to have mold afterwards, or?
No, a good question. If you get it, jump on it right away, no. But you've got to get it within the first 24 hours.
Okay.
No later, because at that point, it will. That's a good question. Yeah. Our fee, I'll tell you what our fees are. We charge $295. That includes the full visual inspection, 1 indoor air sample, and your outdoor control sample. Additional samples are $55 each. That's for this general area. Winchester, because of distance, we charge $325, $55 each. But anywhere from Hagerstown, Berkeley Springs, Martinsburg, Shepherdstown, Charlestown, $295. We try to keep our prices reasonable and affordable for this very reason, to help people. And we do the discount on the extra samples at $55 because we're already there. And it gives people, hey, I don't have to spend $150 for an extra sample. Let's test this other room just to make sure. Because if we have to come back, then it starts over again. It's $295. So we try to do that to help people out financially as well.
Another question.
Yes, ma'am.
What kind of effects can long-term exposure have on your health? Like if you live in it for years and years and years, or read about it?
Big time, big time. Chronic asthma, chronic sinus issues. What else have we heard? People, just fatigue, terrible fatigue.
Is there anything that's irreversible after so long, or?
Oh, well, that now you're starting to get into an MD kind of thing. I think the first thing, remove yourself from the environment would definitely do some degree of helping. But, yeah, I don't know. I think some people, I had one lady who cleaned her parents' window air conditioner. It was full of mold. She was in there cleaning, went up in the emergency room that night. And now can't even stand a little bit in her house. Because she's so, it's just like these things. I had a cousin who got stung one night like 50 times. If he gets stung once now, he runs to the hospital. You know, because your body's just so sensitive to it. Any little thing can trigger it. It's interesting. It is scary, but it's also controllable. I mean, it's something we live with every day. And it's understanding, don't panic. Let's see what's going on. Unless, like I said, unless you walk in the basement, the whole room is like up 4 feet up the wall, then yeah, you know, it's bad. But if you see a little bit here or there, let's investigate, see what's going on, see what the levels are, and then make your recommendations. But again, stress. I've worked with Larry many, many times. I mean, haven't we? With your team and yeah, unfortunately. Love you too, brother. Yeah, but it is repairable. It is fixable. You've had a lot of happy clients afterwards that wanted a house, and we got it fixed, got it cleared for them, and they moved right in. So it's not the end of the world if you have it. But it is to be respected, but it's also it's not nuclear waste. Somebody told me that. Questions?
So are these products that you sell, like the dehumidifier, someone?
No, that's a good question. That's a side item I got into 10 years ago. It's a product that is for air purification. It uses hydrogen peroxide in a gas form. And now it's not to be used as a remediation tool, but as a maintenance tool. It kills mold, it kills germs, viruses, it kills MRSA, Staph, E. coli, and SARS-CoV-2. We tested it June of 2020 against COVID, and it will kill SARS-CoV-2. We actually, just for you local folks, we outfitted Shepherdstown Daycare with this system for their entire daycare. And so they can reopen and give their clients a peace of mind. We did another corporation down in Northern Virginia. They bought 200 units for their back to work initiative to make the employees feel comfortable to come back to work. It does where it's not snake oil, I promise. I don't push it, I offer it, but it's not our main.
Price.
That's a good question. The plug.
That's a good, it's not cheap, but it's very effective.
Unit 2,000.
2,000 runs about $1,500. Now
Okay.
that's for, it says up to 2,000 square feet, but you have to kind of, again, that's height, width, and length, okay? It's not designed for, you could put one in this room, instead of kind of high, and it would cover this room. It's not going to cover your house that's 1,800 square feet, because you've got doors and hallways and rooms and closets. It's more designed for a particular area, or an office space or
It's like
something.
a space like this, it's all open.
Yeah, I mean, it would push it to cover this room with the high ceiling. If it was-
Put it in the HVAC system.
Yeah, the HVAC units, the HVAC systems go right in your plenum, and as the air, what it does, it takes the ambient oxygen and converts it into hydrogen peroxide gas, chemically. And that hydrogen peroxide gas first flows through your ductwork, and then it fills the room, and it kills in the air and on surfaces.
So people can put them on their HVACs in the basement.
And it fill the whole house.
And is that distinguished model?
Yes, yeah, the DW series.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about
They run retails $2,900 for that. They're only
for the furnace?
$2,900. Now, there's some sales every now and then. And I've been involved with it for 10 years. It's American made. They're based out of Texas. And I've never had one return.
What about the budget?
I'm sorry? They run about $800, I think. I don't sell a lot of this. I don't know off the top of my head. But that would be for like a cubicle or a room that's
A small bathroom.
a small bathroom, 5. Again, I have to stress, it's not a remediation tool, it's a maintenance.
Maintenance.
They can take that one and get trapped.
Yeah, you can take that, plug it in your hotel room and turn it on. Nope. It's odorless, colorless, tasteless. Like I said, with blue red smoke, I'd be a millionaire.
What kind of maintenance do you have to do
None.
on it? Well, where's the peroxide?
That's the chemical reaction inside. There's a cell that's encased in a bulb that's encased in a cell. The combination between the paint that's on the cell and the bulb creates the chemical reaction.
And they last for about how long?
2 to 3 years before you have to replace the bulb.
The bulb, okay.
The cell, I should say the cell.
Right, I'm not supposed to be bad, really.
It's about $800 or $900 to replace that, I think. So I was gonna say something else about it, but a lot of HVAC companies want to recommend a blue light. You've probably heard that. I'll put a blue light in. That's great, it works, but you have to bring all the air in your home to that 12-inch blue light and pass over. So, first of all, you're never going to do that. Second of all, if you have issues in your ductwork, germs, bacteria, molds, as soon as that nice clean air goes over that bulb, it's going to pick all that junk back and drop it right back in your house. So you're just creating. This system works as a positive airflow, so that air is going through the duct first and killing whatever's in there first and then dumps into your home. So, again, I offer it, I don't push it, it's not our main business, but I've had tremendous success from it.
Yeah, because you don't want people to use these, then you won't have a job like these people.
I never thought about that. Well, after you get us there, then I'll tell you about it. Now, I have actually a remediation company in North Carolina that I work with who buys these all the time as a maintenance. Again, it's a maintenance tool. If you get a flood and it sits for 3 days, it's not going to stop moving. It's more about your breathing environment that you're having at home. A true story, if it's in your home and somebody comes in who's sick and is coughing or cold, it zaps as soon as it comes out of their mouth. It doesn't have a chance to spread. So, there's a ton on our website about it. It's called CIMR, C-I-M-R, Continuous Infectious Microbial Reduction. And if you go to our website on the card or the flyer, there's a whole section about it. And if you're anybody interested, I can send you more info about it. Yes, sir.
I have a question.
Yes.
So obviously, you're supposed to replace your air filters.
Yes.
And there's always the option at Lowe's, you can buy your normal one for $12, or one that filters basically everything.
Right.
Does that have any benefit to at least $50?
Well, yes and no, and I'll tell you why. If you get it too thick, then it restricts the airflow to your HVAC system. And again, I'm not an HVAC professional, but we did have to study a lot of this in our training. If you get a MERV filter so the MERV rating is so high, that's the filtration part, that air is harder to push and it makes your HVAC system work harder. If you get the really less expensive green ones, everything just flies right through. So you got to try to find a happy medium. But that's a good question. So I think we just paid about $12 a piece for ours or so, and they're MERV 11. And that's usually, that filters most of the junk out.
Okay.
But HEPA is high efficiency particulate vacuum. It filters down to 0.3 microns. That's why mold remediation companies use HEPA filtration, because when they're vacuuming surfaces, it traps those spores in the filters. Whereas anything else, the spores would just fly right through. I know I've thrown a lot at you today. I hope it's not, you liked it? I hope it's not too much. Our email's on there. Cindy's just as qualified as I am. If you have any questions afterwards, please ask us, email us, call us. I've done tons of consultations for people over the phone. If you got a client that's got a picture and they're concerned, send me the picture. I'll tell you. I'll give you my honest opinion. I don't charge you for it. Seriously. I'm not like that. I'm here to help people and kind of alleviate their fears, but I also want to make sure they're not in danger as well. So thank you very, very much for your time. Thank you for letting us come today.
Thank Homes Fire for providing the Thank everybody for coming. We welcome you back next month, November 9th. We will have our last lunch and learn for the year. We'll take a break for December and January, but we'll have Lynn Home Inspections here giving a presentation. Thanks for coming.
Thanks.